Well, if the French won't play ball, then the Royal Marines will have to take people back to France. It's just as simple as that.
But as you can see, they're marching out through the water. Now, the reason they're doing that is they know the police can't stop them once they're in the water. But actually, there's not a police officer to be seen.
The key to all of this is to be able to deport people that come illegally. The last Labour government was deporting over 40,000 people a year who came to Britain illegally. In the past, we wouldn't put up with this. Now we do, and that's because of weak leadership of both the Conservative and the Labour Party.
Farage has made it clear that he doesn't like how the French Navy is helping traffickers bring people illegally into Britain. He thinks the most important thing is to deport people who come to the UK illegally. According to him, in the past, the Labour government was deporting over 40,000 illegal immigrants each year. But now, he says, the UK is allowing this problem to grow because of weak leadership from both the Conservative and Labour parties.
I predicted there would be an invasion unless we got tough on this issue. And, of course, nobody wanted to talk about it. They called me nasty names. They're very good at doing that. And now, 3,800 boats later, 125,000 people later, we now have Labour saying, we'll solve it, we'll crack down on the criminal gangs. Well, we've been saying that about the drugs gangs for decades, and it hasn't made any difference at all.
And over there is Dover. And the French police have watched all of this happen and haven't lifted a finger to intervene.
Farage's frustration is clear. He feels that he saw this crisis coming, but no one took him seriously until it was too late. While his tone might be harsh, it's hard to ignore the numbers he brings up. The challenge, however, is not just about acknowledging the problem, but finding a solution that actually works. Farage is right to question whether simply cracking down on criminal gangs will be enough. After all, if similar strategies haven't solved the drug problem, why would they work for immigration?
In Strasbourg, who stopped it, leave the European Court of Human Rights and make clear that nobody that comes via this route will ever be granted settled status in our country. And thirdly, say to the French Navy, we will not accept your Navy escorting dinghies to our 12-mile line and then handing them over to our...
A €200 inflatable kayak being paddled across. These men have come from East Africa. Now, with no life jackets, they are risking their lives to get to Britain.
Farage's solution is clear. The UK should leave the European Court of Human Rights. He believes that by doing so, the country could take stronger actions, such as making it clear that anyone who enters the UK illegally through these dangerous routes will never be granted settled status. He also calls for a tougher stance against the French Navy, which he accuses of escorting boats carrying illegal immigrants to the UK's waters and handing them over to British authorities.
A growing number of young people do not subscribe to British values, in fact, despise in many ways British. The local elections, where in parts of our inner cities we saw sectarian politics, people voting purely on religious lines, councillors getting elected in Leeds and Burnley and elsewhere screaming Allah Akbar, or things like we're coming to get you. Now, that, I think, was very, very disquieting. The most recent polling on this was done by JL Partners, a very reputable company. This is what it...
Farage expresses deep concern about what he sees as a growing disconnect between young people, particularly young Muslims, and traditional British values. He claims that a significant number of young people in the UK not only reject these values, but even despise them. Farage points to recent local elections as evidence, where, according to him, sectarian politics were at play, with people voting strictly along religious lines.
And this is what I'm worried about. It showed that 23% of 18 to 24-year-old young Muslims living in Britain think that jihad is a good thing. Now, that, of course, is not a British value in any way at all, and that's a very, very disturbing trend. It's particularly prevalent amongst the young. We have a problem, and just to say it's Islamophobic or it's this or it's that is to ignore the fact we have a very real problem.
Yes.
The division with these marches. We see the division with the intolerance towards Jewish people. We see the division in our universities, where a lot of Jewish students have virtually gone into hiding. So unpleasant have things become. That's where the division is. What I am saying is we need to have a debate about this. If we don't sort this out, we're going to have a much bigger problem in the not too distant future.
Farage's concerns about division and intolerance in the UK are serious and highlight real issues that need to be addressed. The rise in anti-Semitism, particularly on university campuses, is alarming, and the fear that some Jewish students are experiencing is unacceptable in any society. Farage is right to call for a debate, as these issues cannot be ignored or swept under the rug.
The first thing is to recognise why we're in the mess we're in. And the reason that nobody else will talk about this is because both the Labour and Conservative parties have caused the problem. Labour opened the door to mass immigration on a scale this country had never seen. And what the Conservatives did in government was to accelerate that trend. You know, you look at the numbers, 1.2 million new people a year settling in the United Kingdom. The numbers are literally mind-blowing. You cannot have integration. You cannot have societies with different communities working together if you have mass immigration at that level. So number one, recognise the problem. And number two, actually reduce mass immigration and hopefully give us a chance to get those separated out communities integrated.
Well, let's talk about
But as I say, the others don't want to talk about it. The others won't talk about it because they've caused it.
Well, let's talk.
Farage's focus on the numbers is meant to underscore the magnitude of the challenge the UK faces with immigration. His concern about the ability of communities to integrate when immigration is at such a high level is a valid point. Integration becomes more challenging when large numbers of people are arriving in a short period, especially if there isn't adequate support to help them settle and integrate into society. However, the issue isn't just about numbers. It's also about how society adapts and supports these new arrivals. While reducing immigration might seem like a straightforward solution, it's important to consider the broader implications. Immigration has contributed to the UK's economy and cultural diversity, and a drastic reduction could have unforeseen consequences. The challenge is finding a balance that allows for sustainable immigration while also ensuring that communities can integrate and thrive together.
We saw other dinghies making the crossing, smaller ones, carrying many more people than they should have done.
Well, if the French won't play ball, then the Royal Marines will have to take people back to France. It's just as simple as that. The law of the sea says if you see a vessel that you think is in danger, you should do your utmost to save them. The French Navy should not be shepherding them across the line.
So you would send...
Farage's suggestion to involve the Royal Marines and his call for a tougher stance are certainly dramatic and would represent a significant escalation in the UK's approach to illegal immigration. While his frustration with the current situation is evident, this approach raises serious questions about international law, diplomacy, and the potential consequences of such actions. Forcing boats back to France could strain relations with a key neighbour and could lead to legal and humanitarian challenges. The comparison to Australia is interesting, but it's also important to recognise the differences between the two situations. Australia's geography, legal framework, and the scale of the problem were different from the UK's current challenges. Adopting a similar approach in the UK might not produce the same results and could even backfire if not carefully managed.